So Jessica, I'm counting 7. We need 12 for quorum.
I see that too. Let's wait a bit.
Yep. Morning, Courtney.
Good morning.
Morning, Donovan. And Ari, good morning. We are just looking for that quorum before we can begin if you're just joining us. Morning, Jeremy. And I think we're at 11. Need one more for quorum. Nope. Hi, Carrie.
Adam says
Stacy.
his,
I
Oh,
was
sorry,
just
go
going to
ahead,
say,
Bennett.
when I went to log on, my Zoom prompted me to download an updated version of the program. So maybe other people are getting the same.
I
Yeah,
just got an email from Adam saying his Zoom is installing updates and he'd
There
be
you
here
go.
shortly.
thanks for the heads up, Bennett.
I think we just reached quorum because
I think we did, yeah. All right. Well, Jessica, shall we begin?
yes.
Very good. And as we always do, let's do some reminders for our members. So Jess, if you could go to the next slide, please. We'll go through these pretty fast. Welcome, task force members. You know the drill on all things using Zoom, and you know that you got access to the mural through the email that Jess sent out recently with the password protection on it. So you're going to want to get situated. I can see some of you joining mural right now, so thank you for that. Next slide. As always, we are joined by our MDH staff, Carrie Globin, who just hopped on a little while ago. Carrie is the epidemiologist supervisor in the injury and violence prevention section, and Dr. Caroline Johnson is our researcher. Task force leadership includes Dr. Jessica Nielsen, who serves as chair, Bennett Hartz, who serves as vice chair, and Paula DeSanto, who serves as the work group chair. And you are all supported by the MAD staff. That includes Jessica Burke, who's got her fingers on the controls, Nick Core, who's also working on background, and myself, Stacy Sjogren, the senior management consultant, who works in tandem with Jessica to lead these meetings. Next slide, please. We do know that hold tight there. I just want to do a couple more things. Reminders for the members. Remember, members, that we are not using our chat because it doesn't allow for full transparency, as this is live streamed to YouTube. So use your voices to do that. Use your raise hand and I'll tease you or cue you up, or Jessica will cue you up, and we'll be able to have conversation that way. And with that, I'll turn my attention to all of you that may be observing this meeting. Thank you for your interest. We appreciate it. This meeting, whoa, we lost the slide. There it is. This meeting won't be recorded, but the minutes will be posted, or the meeting summary will be posted on the task force website, along with other meeting materials for this particular meeting and past ones you can find there too. You can see where you can find them on the screen. And you're welcome to look for the information you're searching for there. Next slide, please. And before I get into this one, just finding all my little lists of reminders here. Observers, of course, you're not able to make comment during the meeting. You will see in a little while that the members use a space called Mural, M-U-R-A-L, to do their work so everybody's voice can be heard. Jess will be sharing, sharing her screen so you can watch what the members are doing as well as listen to what they're saying, but you won't be able to access the mural on your own because it's password protected. And then with that, I'll remind everybody that the legislative charge for the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force was established to advise the legislature on the legal, medical, and policy issues associated with the legalization of psychedelic medicine in the state. For purposes of this work, psychedelic medicine refers to MDMA, psilocybin, and LSD. Next slide. The task force does have several duties. I'm not going to read through these top to bottom. Suffice it to say, I'll remind everybody that one of its duties is to do scientific research. That's been Carolyn's bailiwick. Next slide, please. And then to develop a comprehensive plan, including things like statutory changes that may be necessary for the legalization of psychedelic medicine, state and local regulations of psychedelic medicine, considering federal law, policy, and regulation of psychedelic medicine, et cetera, as well as number 4, down on the bottom, to educate the public on recommendations made to the legislature and others about necessary and appropriate actions related to the legalization of psychedelic medicine in the state. Next slide. Very good. Where I think we'll go next, and as Jess is getting situated on the screen there, perfect, Jess. Jessica, may I turn it over to you to talk through what the members can expect to happen in the meeting today?
Absolutely. Thanks, Stacy. And thank you everyone and task force members for our kind of last big meeting while we finalize our report. And also it's our 1-year anniversary. We met 1 year ago in November to convene this work. So I'm really grateful for everything that we've accomplished over the last year. So today, just some kind of agenda items. We're going to approve the September and October meeting summaries. Then we'll go to sharing member collected feedback if there's any still to report on. Next, we'll talk about finalizing the content of our task force report. And then we're going to be focusing on sort of looking forward and what are some of the next steps once the task force work is completed. We're going to break out into some small group discussions, and then we're going to have a large group debrief on the topic. So I'll turn it back over to you, Stacy.
Perfect. Actually, I think what we need to do next, as I'm seeing more and more members join the meeting, is get through our roll call. So shall we do that next, Jessica?
Yes.
Very good. All right, members, you know the drill. Alphabetical order. I'll go as quickly as I'm able to go here, and we'll start with Courtney Amundsen. Are you here?
Here.
Whoopsie, why did hang on a second. And Helen Bassett, sorry.
Yep, good morning. Hi.
Hey, Helen. Guthrie Capsella. Is Guthrie here?
I don't see him.
I don't see him either. Okay. John Connolly.
Present.
Good morning. Paula DeSanto.
Here.
Good morning. Jeremy Drucker.
Here, and apologies in advance. I might have to drop and then come back. I've got a couple of meetings I have to go to.
Thanks for letting us know, Jeremy, and good morning to you. Stefan Egan.
Here.
Margaret Gavian.
Here.
Good morning. Bennett Hartz.
Here.
Senator Mark Curran.
Here.
Good morning. Nick Leonards.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, good morning, Nick. Ari McHenry.
I'm here.
Good morning. Jessica Nielsen.
Here.
Kit O'Connell. I thought I saw
O'Neill,
Kit.
but I'm here. Yeah.
Hey, Kit. Jill Phillips.
Here and good morning.
Good morning. Kenneth Sass.
Here.
Donovan Sather. Donovan,
Here.
I thought, there you are. I thought I saw your name earlier. Representative Andy Smith. Anybody see Andy's name on the list?
No.
Nope. Okay. Michael Tabor. No. Okay. Adam Tomczyk.
Here.
Good morning.
Morning.
Ranchi Verghese. Do not see Ranji. Okay, and Rep. Nolan Smith. All right. So we do have a quorum. So I'll turn it back over to you, Jessica.
Yeah, thanks.
Uh-huh.
So the first thing we need to do is approve the meeting minutes from September and October. But before we do that, I've been hearing some feedback about the posted meeting minutes and wanting to add some clarity about which recommendations passed a supermajority. So I recommend that we vote, that we have vote tallies under each recommendation, which do exist in the October meeting minutes, but not in the September meeting minutes. So what I want to propose is that we move forward to approve the recommendations with whether we want to add those additional things to the September meeting minutes, but having sort of agreed upon that, go ahead and do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes by roll call?
I move.
Second. Oh.
All right, so it looks like we had Paula as a move and Ari as a second. So does anybody want to discuss this addition to the meeting minutes before we go ahead and do a vote by roll call to approve the minutes?
I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand with this new Zoom update. I'm trying to find it, but I think we should be as transparent, explicit, clear as possible about the vote totals and what people voted for. So I'm in support of that.
Thanks, Adam. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments about that addition before we approve the minutes? Hearing none. I'm going to turn it over to Stacy.
Very good.
Roll call.
And Courtney.
Yes.
Helen.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Paula.
I approve September and abstain from October as I was not here.
Got it. Thank you. Jeremy.
Yes.
Stefan.
Good for yes for September, abstain from October.
Margaret.
Yes.
Bennett.
Abstain from September, approve October.
Mark.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Ari.
Yes.
Jessica.
Yes.
Kit.
Yes.
Jill.
Yes.
Ken. Ken Sass. Oh, okay. Donovan,
Yes.
Adam.
Yes to both.
Very good. Minutes with the addition of more information on supermajority voting have passed for both September and October, or been approved, sorry. All right, Jessica, back to you.
Thanks, Stacy. All right, so now we're going to move on to member collected feedback, if there's still any at this point. I will say I have been, over the last year, holding listening sessions for the community, but given some understandings around data practices and some laws in the state around what we can share publicly in the report, I put out a request for testimonials from the broader psychedelic community here in Minnesota, with some language borrowed from the Minnesota data practices statute around, what would be included, what would the information be used for, and making sure we were getting people's explicit consent to include that. So I'm not going to share it right now, but it has been included in the report. We have a section that is, testimonials from the community. So we've got about 15 of those, at least from this community, that I think are really interesting and provide kind of that lived experience perspective of psychedelic medicines. And so that's all I have to report from my end on community feedback, but I'll open up the floor for anyone else that wants to share any updates you have from your communities or agencies.
I can't find my hands raised. Can I just jump in?
Yeah, I think just for everyone's thing, I think on the bottom toolbar, that react, it's like a heart, and then there's
Right.
you click on that, then you should see all the options to raise hand or
Got it. Yeah. I just
emoji in there or something. Okay, go ahead,
had a
Margaret.
moment. Yeah. So I think not direct feedback, but I'm getting a lot of questions about what are the recommendations? Like where are we going? What's happening? So I'm getting a lot of questions from that, and from patients themselves, a lot of concern about what are they supposed to do if they're interested in psychedelics. So kind of I share kind of where our vote has been, and then given the delay in FDA and all the other hoops, a lot of concern about what are they supposed to do? What are their options? And then another interesting theme that I keep hearing is not so much kind of psychedelics are going to save the world mentality, but I want that tool in my toolbox mentality, really, from patients. So I think that has been a kind of nice balanced piece of feedback that I've started to hear more of, that we just can't shove a bunch of mushrooms down our throat and have our trauma solved. So that part has been good to hear, but a lot of questions about what now, what do we do? What are our options? So that's kind of that's the theme.
Thank you, Margaret. I think that's a kind of a unifying theme. I think a lot of us are hearing of like, what's next, which I think we're going to touch on it towards the end of the meeting today. Anyone else? Paula, are you raising your hand or clapping?
Oh, you're sorry. Looks like I'm clapping, but I will raise my hand going forward. Oh, geez. I just want to echo that. It seems like I probably get 2 at least per day people reaching out because they know somebody that's in trouble. Existing treatments have not been effective and they want to know what's available. So there's a lot of kind of this continued sense of really desiring options and a fair amount of desperation daily.
Yeah, thanks, Paula. Adam?
Just a question for the practitioners. Are you recommending ketamine treatment for people since it is available and legal already, or like how do you respond to these? Because obviously the psilocybin's not online yet, the MDMA is not legal yet. I'm just wondering how ketamine plays into it when you're speaking with patients or potential patients.
Yeah, Margaret.
Good question. I am always presenting options. So I do always discuss ketamine as an option and let people make their own decisions about that. So yes, to answer your question.
Paula?
Similarly, there's been, more restrictions on IV ketamine. Most health plans won't pay for it. I think UCare is the only one. They're all requiring Spravato. And so there's maybe less interest in that, but also some willingness, some positive outcomes, and also some folks that have absolutely done multiple rounds of ketamine without identified benefit. But definitely it's in our recommendations.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Anyone else? Hearing none, maybe we can move on to the next agenda item. So we're going to move into talking about finalizing the task force report content. Is that right, Stacey? So first up is sort of talking about, I don't know if there's another slide here. I guess we can just kind of briefly go over, even though we've sort of seen this ad nauseum, this is the messy timeline of all the work we've been doing over the last year. If you could go to the next slide, please. Just sort of the more simplified version of where we are. We're basically almost done writing the report. It's in a pretty finalish form. It's now at, the different agencies doing copy editing to make sure there aren't any typos or grammatical things, and that it's sort of readable and accessible to people maybe not fully engrossed in all of the jargon that we've been throwing around regarding the medical, scientific, and legal terms. And so that's going to take some time, but we do kind of want to talk about what's going on and if there's anything else we want to shore up today and discuss sort of like what's in the report. Do we want to add anything else? Knowing that we can't really add too much at this point unless some primary authors of those sections have very strong arguments for anything that needs to be added. I do want to make a comment about kind of, I don't know if there's something on the next slide that might bring this into perspective. Just thinking about going back to our original task force charter around talking to the media. I know there's a lot of eyes on us. There's a lot of attention being paid to this evolving space and the work that we're doing. And just want to be mindful of like what we're sharing with the media and just reminding folks that as the elected task force chair, I am sort of the official representative to speak to the media on behalf of the task force. That doesn't mean that all of you cannot talk to the media yourself as members of the task force, and you can absolutely share your perspective from that position. But when it comes to speaking for the task force, that's something that only myself as the chair can do, as well as Bennett as the vice chair. So just wanted to just clarify that, but just know that like some of you might be getting contacted by various media outlets, and just know that it is okay. Just always kind of preface it with the caveat that you're speaking for yourself as your position as a task force member and the community you represent, not as a representative of the task force. And then I'll turn it over to Caroline now to talk about the timeline of the report. Take it away, Caroline.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessica. So we're going to kind of briefly go over where things stand with the report and then a little bit on what's next. So kind of another quick review of this timeline. We sent the full draft to MAD for the first copy editing round on the 24th or the 25th, it ended up being. And so we have this week to make any edits, any additions you might find necessary. And then we will send it to MDH for the final copy editing process this Friday. So that's November 8th, 4 days from now. After we get it back from MDH, we can address any feedback they may have. And I imagine we'll aim to have this final report submitted probably before people start leaving for the end of the year holidays. But don't quote me on that, it might change. Jess, I see your hand quickly.
Yeah, I just wanted to update on the MAD copy editing process. Our copy editor did not have time to finish before she had to turn in her laptop on Friday. It was her last day. Our director is finishing copy editing and doing our MAD review right now, and I will let folks know when that version is up. And we'll have to take all the comments that have come in on the version on Teams and like sync those with the changes that have been made in the copy editing process as well.
Perfect, thank you. So to kind of get to the report and give us an overview of where we stand. Right now, the body of the report is around 60 pages. This doesn't include the executive summary, which we're working on shortening, or the appendices, of which there are 15. These provide an additional 93 pages. I know that's a lot of pages, and I know that we've encouraged everyone to review the whole thing, and that sounds really overwhelming. But I really think, the focus for the general review of those who, are not authors or reviewers really can just be on that main report. So, really read through those main sections, just see if there's any glaring edits you really think need to be made. And then you can just kind of be aware of what the appendices are. So for example, we have an appendix for the list of the task force members. We have one for housing the legislation, things like that. So there's a big chunk of this report that might not necessarily need edits. But I would say just kind of being aware of what those sections are by even just paying attention to the titles is a really good step if it seems daunting. And so once we get the feedback from MAD, Jess will integrate comments, I'll help integrate comments. And then, during that time, the authors and the reviewers of each section can make any necessary edits or additions if they really feel something needs to be there. And I would suggest to the authors that as you are working through the draft, try to make those edits directly if you can, rather than just leaving comments. But do feel free to use the track changes feature as you work. And for those of you not directly involved in the writing process, when you're reviewing it, if you find edits and you want to leave comments, it's really helpful to either use that @ feature to alert whoever you need to, or just find some other way to let them know directly that there's something they need to look at. It's a huge draft, and sometimes comments get lost if they're not explicitly noted. And so letting people know is really helpful. And if you want to find out or remember who is in charge of any specific section, the author list is in the September section of the mural, or you can email one of us and we can direct you to whoever's in charge. But the really big takeaway is to take this week to review the draft, everyone, as you're able. The sooner the better, not waiting until, Thursday night. It's fantastic. Because then, we'll get it to MDH on Friday, and then we can address anything they might find kind of in the same way. I imagine that will be more through email, since we won't really have much of a meeting to talk about it through then or through the work groups. But really just editing and finalizing the report this week. So do we have any questions before we kind of move on to the next section? Okay, great. Seeing none. Oh, one last thing before I hand it back to Jessica, completely off topic. I did find a congressional map with tribal overlay that was brought up last meeting in the section. So it is in the Teams folder. It's in the resources folder, and then in Minnesota specific resources. So feel free to look at that and see, what district you're in. Okay, back to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, so we'd be really grateful for any kind of feedback on the report. Just to kind of bring that up a little bit, we want to make sure, we've covered all of our bases. We tried to put a lot in there. I had to be cut off at some point from putting more stuff in there, because it's just a pretty expansive field. There's a lot going on. It's changing very quickly. But at some point we need to just stop. So I've gotten used to saying at the time of report writing, because there's a lot of things that are going to change in the next couple months. But sort of having said that, just wondering if folks have looked through the report and if there's anything that folks feel maybe we aren't addressing sufficiently, or any glaring errors or things that are not factual. Would be helpful to know. One thing I've been thinking about, wanting to make sure every community that could be, impacted by legalizing psychedelic medicine is represented in the report. And so just curious, and just kind of want to open it up for discussion if, for those that have looked at that, if anyone feels that there's a community that's not accurately or favorably represented in the report as it currently is written.
And Jessica, this is Stacy. Correct me if I'm wrong though, but we've got space on mural 2 in area number 1.
Yeah.
If people would like to just post their thinking there. And I think what you're referring to fits in that what concerns or topics have we missed? Whoopsie, that should be addressed in the report, correct? So there's a
Correct.
space for people to write as well as verbalize.
Correct. Yeah. So if folks don't want to say it on camera, if you want to just put a little sticky note in mural, that would be great. And I don't know, we have some space open holding for Bennett. I know you meet with the state agencies, and if there's anything you want to report around that and how the report's coming together. I know we had talked about making sure to distinguish that this is the task force's report and not any individual agency's report. So I don't know if you want to speak more on that, Bennett.
Yeah, sure. So we've already incorporated that language into the executive summary, just noting that the task force report is a product of the collective of the task force and not of any individual person on the task force or any state agency representatives. And then, I mean, the rest of our conversation was just about how we as representatives of each of our agencies were approaching reviewing the report. So there's no collective feedback to share other than that we just as a group kind of talked through what our various perspectives were and how we were approaching editing.
Great. Thanks, Bennett. All right. Is there anything else folks want to talk about? Otherwise, we can give people some time to just kind of sit and interact with mural and provide your thoughts there. We'll start that time now. Folks want to get on mural and share your thoughts.
And I will just summon people to the right area so they're not having to search through the whole thread. So that's me grabbing your screen.
Stacey, do we want to broach the next box and people can engage with one or the other or both at this time?
I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, so the next kind of box that's next to this one is just kind of thinking about, what are members watching on this topic from across the nation? There's a lot of other things going on in other states. There's a ballot initiative that people are going to vote on tomorrow in Massachusetts to create a state legalized program, kind of similar to what is happening in Colorado. And there's a lot of other states putting forth legislation. And there is a section in the task force report specifically about like trying to summarize what is happening in every other state. So just kind of want to get your thoughts on kind of what you're observing. What are you aware of? What are some topics that you think are relevant? And go ahead and also put those in mural during this time. Thank you.
And of course, if you would rather just come on microphone and share your thoughts verbally, that's fine too. We just want to give everybody the options. And this is just a reminder to those that might have just tuned in to this meeting. Why the silence? Well, because the members are thinking about the 2 questions posed on the screen right now. The first question area that they're thinking about is what concerns or topics have we missed that should be addressed in the report? That's on the left side. On the right side, the question is, what items are members watching on this topic from across the nation? So silence is just members working and thinking. And Jessica, I'm inclined maybe another minute. What's your gut saying? About a minute?
Yeah, there's not a ton of activity, so
Yep.
see a lot of things moving around, but not a lot of stickies being entered. So yeah, maybe 1 or 2 more minutes and then we'll move on.
Okay, very good.
Jess, do you want to talk about the timeline for additions, or was that already covered?
I guess we hadn't really talked about it. It's kind of on the same timeline as finishing editing, you know. Hopefully if folks can get it in by the end of the week. Otherwise, it would have to, anything else would have to get inserted in the MDH kind of review process. And I don't know enough about that to talk about it intelligently. I don't know if Kari or Caroline would be able to address that, like, you know, how it would work on their end.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? My computer is being funny again.
Yeah, I can repeat it. It's sort of what's the timeline for additions? Like, I know there's a few things I would like to add. And what is the process? Should it be like in a comment? Should we email it to you, or just do a track changes in the draft? Because I know the draft's being copy edited, so like wouldn't want to mess up that process. What's the best way to deliver the content that needs to be added, and what's the time frame for that?
I actually can address that then. Just, I think, like, how much are we talking? Like, would it be unwieldy to do it in the comments? Otherwise, I would just track changes and maybe highlight it and add a comment like, I added this. That's probably what would be easiest.
Yeah, so for the things that I've noted, I'm like, I want to add a clarifying or amended statement here. I've highlighted as a comment and then kind of put what I want to put. Like, one of them was like one of the bios of the subject matter experts. I've gotten a few more testimonials from the community that I want to add in. It's minor stuff like that. It's not like I want to add a whole section or something.
Yeah, no, that's what you're doing. Sounds fine.
But ideally before Friday, so that then MDH has their version and nothing can be amended after that. I guess we'll have some results, because there are some sections that are sort of pending how the vote turns out tomorrow, like for Massachusetts. I know there's a bill moving through the Illinois legislature that has a hearing in December. I don't know that that'll be something that we can fix in December if there's some kind of ruling on that. So, and then there's this right to try case that's pending a ruling in the Ninth Circuit in California. So I don't know if we just kind of leave those as continue to look, or, you know, if there is a ruling or some answer to those things, what's the last absolute point, we can put that in before we send it off to the legislature.
I am, Jessica, this is Stacy, appreciating your phrase earlier, as of this time or as of this writing, and how difficult it is to keep up with things. It's a bit of a moving target. I'm looking at the 2 thoughts on the left-hand side, ideas about concerns or topics that may have been missed in the report as it's written right now. There's 2, one separate section on religious uses, and then the second is, along with public education, a source for patient Q&A. I'm curious if there's more thoughts about what might be in the report right now and why that might not be enough in these writers' minds. And if there is the support that might be necessary to get that additional writing done, if most of you feel like this is an important addition. So can we probe a little bit more along those lines? Does that make sense, Jessica?
Yeah, I can start with the religious use section. That was mine. I think, you know, we talk about it, it's infused throughout, but there's not like an explicit section on it. And it's like covered in the research and the indigenous ways of knowing and like the spiritual component of a lot of these experiences. And then there's also some discussion of it in sort of like the legal sections around exemptions that have been granted. But I know it's kind of come up around whether we want to really kind of center that, given it's the long history of its religious use in different plant medicines and cultures. So just kind of curious what folks' thoughts. I think it's sufficiently covered. It's just there's not a specific section on it. And so I'm just curious what others think about.
So are there any members who are quite uncomfortable with the religious uses permeating more broadly across the report and feeling, oh my goodness, we really have to have a separate section? Can we hear from those people?
I think I'm speaking not to call anyone out. I know, Adam, you brought that up at one of our working groups.
Yeah, I'll just go. So I brought this up at the last working group, and we discussed it. I'm happy with where we left it off, having religious use kind of throughout the entire report, as opposed to a specific section. I don't have the bandwidth to write a specific section, so I don't want to like make work for somebody who needs to write another section. My reason is that, you know, from the limited involvement I have had with Psychedelic Society in Minnesota, that was like a key concern from the people who are attending, that the spiritual component of this not be forgotten or left on the cutting room floor. So one thing I think, like one argument in favor of having a specific section on religious or spiritual uses would be, you know, if these busy legislators or their staff are reading this piecemeal, it might be handy to have, you know, something that jumps out as a section as opposed to it being permeated throughout. But again, I don't have the capacity to write that section. I don't know who does at this point. So those are my thoughts on it. I don't want to make work for somebody, and I can't work for myself at this point, given what's going on in my union president role at the moment.
And therein lies the rub. Like if there is great passion by a member to hit something harder or add something, we need to have that person have the bandwidth in order to add that additional section, because we're just tapped out now by writers at this stage in the game. So that's the conundrum.
Yeah, I appreciate that. This was not I didn't put it in the mural, so somebody else must have been thinking about it too.
It was me.
Oh, okay. All right, there we go.
So let's pause. Is there anybody else that wants to weigh in on that?
And write it.
Weigh in and write it. Yeah.
I think it could be, you know, a paragraph that is, I agree, it would be important for us to have, and it looks like there's plenty of spaces for it to fit in, perhaps in the introduction or somewhere in the introduction. It doesn't need to be lengthy.
Are you willing to do that writing, Courtney?
I'm willing to do it. I have time this week.
I can look over what Jessica writes. I'll commit to that.
I just wanted to get a sense of how people thought, given that we're trying to wrap things up and not add more. And just, I don't know, Caroline, you've kind of looked at it the most, and what's your sense of kind of that as a theme throughout the report? And do you think it's sufficiently covered, or do you think an additional kind of precise paragraph on this would help clarify it?
I agree with all the things you said at first, that it is, it is woven into many, many sections. So I think it's sufficiently covered. But I do see Adam's point on, if people are reading this kind of chunk by chunk, maybe just a paragraph, maybe it doesn't have to be, a huge section, but just kind of a compilation, and then maybe pointing to, see this section, see that section for more information.
Is anybody not comfortable with Jessica making an executive decision based on how much time she has to look at this, about her doing that initial writing of a paragraph? That's what I'm hearing from most people. If she doesn't get it in, it's permeating throughout. If she does, bonus points. Does anybody have any objection to her making that executive decision? Go ahead, Adam. I didn't quite hear that. It was choppy.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if I'm choppy or not. Can people hear me?
Yep, now we can. Thank you.
So I don't think it needs to be lengthy. I think we could be a page of just taking all of the references throughout the entire report regarding religious or spiritual uses and condensing them down. Part of the reason why I think it might be persuasive potentially is the idea of religious freedom is a very salient issue for people on all sides of the political spectrum. And speaking directly toward that could connect with people deeply. And I would like this report to be as persuasive as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Bennett, go ahead.
I agree. And I also think that it's useful to include, because, other than people who are licensed to use Schedule I drugs as clinicians and researchers, the religious use is, I think the only other legally accepted use of psychedelic medicines in the United States. And that's an important lens to have in the report as well.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, Bennett. It is discussed in the legal appendix around administrative exemptions in terms of like what's legally protected. But I think that could be put into a main paragraph, the report, to really kind of make sure that that's known, and then reference the appendix if they want to dig into the details of the legalese.
So I think what we're hearing then is, Jessica, if you can find the bandwidth to make that addition, go ahead, stressing the things that you've been hearing here. That Courtney, if you give her a heads up, can hop on the document, look what you've written, and just be a second kind of sounding board for it. So unless anybody speaks up now that that is a bad idea, that's how we'll proceed on that one. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Okay. So let's look at the next one. Along with public education, a source for patient Q&A. I'm curious about this one. I'm frankly curious if there are other external resources that this document could maybe point to as a reference. So may we ask the person that added that to come on mic and talk a little bit more about it?
Yeah, I wrote that.
Yeah.
The public education it's fairly exhaustive. It lists lots of different aspects of that we would want to cover. And I was just thinking about what Margaret had brought up at the meeting about how or where we could direct people who want to stay engaged in the community conversation. And I know that would be kind of ongoing work, but it might be something to add to that list. And
Courtney,
maybe I missed it.
Do you know, Courtney, if something like that exists somewhere?
I think there's probably, there's the Psychedelic Society in Minnesota. There's other groups as well. Like there's groups for clinicians, and maybe it's worth just listing that.
All right.
Again,
Carolyn, what do you have to add?
We have an appendix in the report that's specifically for resources. So not things that are like academic references. And so that would be a wonderful place. It's mostly like hyperlinks. So you can say, you know, such and such, you could Psychedelic Society, and you could link to that. Right now it's kind of organized by, you know, here's resources for recommendation 1, 2, 3, and a couple other, maybe the veteran sections. So we could add a subsection in there for public education. Please see these existing resources. So that is an option.
Does that not resonate with anybody? Adding it as a separate section in the appendix where there are a lot of other hyperlinks. Does that not resonate with anybody that wants to talk about why? Otherwise, I think in your silence, I'm hearing, go ahead, Caroline, that's a great, easy fix, I think. Okay. Jessica, you want to walk everybody through what's in that other box then, and see if there's more conversation that people would like to have about what are people watching across the nation?
Yeah. So I guess we can open up the first one. I don't know who put this in here, but if you want to come on and kind of elaborate more developments with MDMA and FDA approval.
That was me. I'm just interested in it. You know, we've talked a lot about it here over the last year, and there was a big development back in August that was a surprise in a lot of ways. So it's just something I'm curious about. I don't know if it has any impact on the report. We don't know at the moment. It's still in development.
Yeah, it's a good thing to address. I think we try to talk about it in relation to, you know, the research is ongoing. The FDA is calling for more research. There's also now this other company, Compass, has scaled back their phase 3 trial and pushed back their date for final reporting, given some logistical issues and understanding how the FDA ruled on the MDMA decision. So I think, you know, what we're saying is, as of report writing, this is the status, and kind of encouraging people to continue to watch what's happening at the federal level regarding these clinical trials, because it's kind of unclear, and there seems to be a bit of scrambling from some of the pharmaceutical companies around maybe how to adjust their trial designs and recruitment procedures and things like that. So I think it's kind of a unknown right now as everyone tries to kind of adapt to the new rules that FDA has put out. So I don't know if that answers the question, or, you know, Caroline, you know, is there something that explicitly says this is it in the like scientific research section?
We do discuss it pretty much any time MDA has come up in the report. This has kind of been tagged on as an addendum, kind of the discussion around it.
So Adam, does that address that sufficiently, or do you think there should be more that is kind of clarified around it? Because I haven't updated.
I think that's.
I just saw that yesterday that they were doing that for the psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression trial. So that's not been added yet.
Yeah, I think the report's good with regard to it. I was thinking like really broadly. I also put the orange sticky in about bipartisan support, just like thinking really broadly about what else is going on nationally or internationally. So but with regard to ongoing FDA approval process for MDMA, I think we got it in the report.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. And then I put the other one in there, just in terms of, you know, what's coming out of the tribal working group in Colorado and some controversies around the bill in Massachusetts. You know, I think some of the programs are just proposing to do psilocybin. Mushrooms are easy to grow. They don't pose conservation issues because they're being sourced from locations that either are in limited supply and at risk of extinction, or they're having to be imported from countries because they don't grow here, and that's posing an issue for the communities that grow them. We've talked about this in the context of like biopiracy and ecological conservation. And so just thinking of that, of like, even though there is this bipartisan support for natural plant medicines, there are some other issues at play when it comes to trying to source these things, and just wanting to be mindful of that narrative. And I know we're not talking about any of these additional things, but they are kind of coming up in the broader conversations around legalizing plant medicines. So curious how folks, if anyone has any thoughts about that. Just wanted to bring it up as a topic. It's a pretty controversial one.
Jessica, are you thinking about going in, like discussing ayahuasca, the San Pedro peyote cacti, and iboga in our report as
Sorry, go on.
kind of part of the bigger conversation around entheogens?
I mean, it's brought up in a few sections. I know we touch on it in the decriminalization section around like the decriminalized nature movement that's really pushing for, you know, at least decriminalizing these natural ones that you can grow. And then in the clinical programs around like potentially creating future space for other plant medicines to be folded in, because Colorado, you know, they initially approved and did all the rulemaking around psilocybin mushrooms, but now they have this tribal working group trying to figure out what are the rulemaking around the other plant medicines that the state wanted to legalize, and Massachusetts is trying to follow suit and kind of mirror Colorado. And there's a lot of intense conversations being had on this. And so just wanting to be mindful, it is kind of addressed in that concept that I don't know. So just bringing it up.
My only thought would be, I mean, I acknowledge it's important. It's part of the much broader conversation in development of these natural plant medicines, natural fungal medicines. But I really think our report should really focus on the three key that are identified in the charter statute, the psilocybin, LSD, and MDMA, just generally. So, I mean, we might be saying the same thing here.
Yeah, they're more like placeholders because it's the sort of like, what does the legislature want to do with this playbook of like, where is the space going and what are other states actually talking about? And that this could be something the legislature has to contend with in any bills that might start getting written and submitted and discussed. But we pretty much only focus on the three that are in the legislation. And I'm looking at you, Courtney, because I know we kind of had some back and forth on this of like placeholders for the clinical program with mushrooms. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was just looking through it to see if we have a section that talks about like ongoing work. You know, we talked about having, you know, mentioning having a working group. I wonder if we can also talk about that aspect of continuing to look at the other substances, but I don't really, am I missing that? I know it's in like the clinical research program recommendation piece, but I don't see a paragraph that separates it at all. Might I be missing it?
It might have just been our kind of comments around kind of some broader language that was in there. I think what is more pertinent to the report, because we don't really know how this is going to play out, and there is this Colorado federally recognized tribal working group that's being chaired by one of the subject matter experts we had come present, Christine DC McCleve, and they will be submitting their report on what their recommendations are for these other plant medicines at the beginning of 2025. We won't have that report for our knowledge, but sort of referencing that that's forthcoming, and that should be a guide for legislatures in different states when considering trying to create laws around some of these other plant medicines. So right now it's just sort of included in sort of like the feedback we got from the March meeting, and just sort of like wait for this report to come out of Colorado. So I don't know if that's sufficient.
Well, and partly the intent of that second discussion box in area number 1 is to get a sense just broadly of what are all you members tracking nationally? Not that it has to be in the report, but what are you paying attention to right now? Paula.
I just kind of in this theme, I appreciate this conversation, and I don't know if it would make sense. I mean, I know you talk about it, you know, at the time of this writing, but we're identifying a handful of kind of key things that need to be watched, and that if maybe those are just at the time of this writing, these are kind of key things to watch, what's happening in Massachusetts, obviously, with the report coming out of Colorado, a tribal work group. So I think that might be helpful just to name them. I don't know. And just in the executive summary. Religious freedom. And I think that's another important conversation. And because with churches popping up all over the place and, how that's going to impact kind of similar to the cannabis movement, maybe that if states are, all starting to do activity regarding access through religious freedom, that's kind of the questions around how can the federal government manage that level of activity, or would they even try? I don't know.
So Paula, what you're suggesting is in the executive summary towards the end, saying something like, at the time of this writing, here are the X number of items that are on our radar actively. List.
Yes, and perhaps the legislation would want to call, some members of the task force to come in and provide updates on these issues that are all just
Courtney.
Clearly.
Maybe it could just be added, like a paragraph about that added to the discussion.
Added to the discussion. Help me understand what you're referring to.
The paragraph just on, there's a discussion paragraph, which would seem to fit this conversation with the thought.
Are you talking about the discussion section under the scientific research?
Yeah, right above community research summary on page 41.
Yeah, because I think that's a discussion of kind of bringing all the scientific literature together. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carolyn. I don't know.
Sorry, it just ends with, how there's continuing research. And so it might be a good place to add that, well, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it needs its own paragraph.
Yeah, I mean, I think I hear that, and I think it might be easier to see and then bring it all together because it's not just around watching what's going on with the scientific research. It's also about what's going on with ongoing federal litigations with the DEA and ballot measures and other state legislatures and all the churches popping up. And I'm wondering if just like a brief few sentences at the end of the executive summary of like, okay, having said all this, these are the things that we need to continue to watch that we just can't really summarize at this time.
I think that was incredibly helpful.
Okay.
Are there any members that have different opinions on the value of adding that paragraph within the overarching executive summary? I think that'd be an easy add, would it not, Jessica and Jess?
I think it's an easy add. It's just, I'm also hearing, please cut the executive summary down.
That's what I was going to say. The executive summary is already really long.
I'm going to work on that this week because I think a lot of that I want to move into like the introduction because a lot of it is just too wordy and it doesn't need to be so detailed because it's an executive summary. So a lot of that can get moved, not like deleted or changed, but just sort of paste to a different section. And then I think we were aiming for like a 3-page executive summary. It's 7 pages right now.
I mean, so that's not terrible.
Let's just have another pause here just to make sure there are no members that have a different idea about adding that to the executive summary. Just want to make sure we've closed the loop. Okay. Jessica, I'm mindful of the time and wondering if we need to pivot to those small group conversations, but before we do that, I need to take a logistical timeout and just check. I see on the participant list something called Guth's phone, and I'm wondering if that might be Guthrie. So if it is you, Guthrie, right now I've got you listed as absent. Is that you?
Yep. Hey, it's me.
All right. I will put you as present. Thanks. Glad I checked.
Perfect.
Thanks. And we probably are due for a break before we break out for little groups. I know I want to get a cup of coffee.
So back in 10, Jessica, what are you comfortable with?
Yeah, 10 minutes. We'll come back at 10:46.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. See you in 10 minutes. If you're within the sound of my voice, we're going to begin again in 2 minutes. So this is your 2-minute warning. And welcome back, everyone. Jessica, are you ready to tee up our next area of work?
Yes, thank you. All right. So just basically, we're going to break out into some groups. And so as we wrap up our responsibilities to produce the legislative report, it made sense to the planning team to set aside some time today for members to talk about what broader issues related to psychedelic medicine in Minnesota we still need to talk about as we continue this work moving forward in our various communities. So with that in mind, we've identified 4 discussion topics and have set aside time for small group conversations at this meeting. You should have all received an email with a list of these things and sort of ranking which would be your top 3 choices so we could place you into groups. While these conversations won't impact the report, we thought you might appreciate the chance for such conversations and have provided space in Mural to capture the key points. So we'll come back together to share highlights of your group's thoughts. Around 15 to 20 minutes will be the time of the breakout group, and then we'll come back together and Stacy and Jess will moderate kind of a discussion around kind of how all these things might tie together. Stacy and Jess, do you want to give some logistical directions and how this will be?
Absolutely. Excuse me. First, I'll read through what those discussion topics are, and then give a little bit more logistical information, and then Jessica will talk about and explain who's going where. With this note, we'll keep one group where you are right now so that those that are observing this meeting have at least one small group to focus on. And then, as Jessica said, we'll debrief the main highlights of each group's small conversation. So the 4 question or conversation areas are: what are the elements of a formal education program and who, like what entity, might best be responsible for it in the near future? Nick will be your scribe and your host for that meeting. Second discussion point is: where could a psychedelic medicine program live successfully within the structure of state government? Carolyn will be the point person there. Third discussion topic: how could the cost of psychedelic medicine be affordable for people who need it? Jess will be the host there. I think that's with me here on the main site. And then finally, how could interested task force members and their communities continue working together to advocate for this work? Carrie will be the point person for that. So with that, just one more note before I turn it over to Jess to get everybody in the right slot. I've got a timer feature in Mural. So as soon as you're into your groups, I'll set that timer for 15 minutes and you'll hear the bell ring and Jess will pull you all back. Jessica, what do you have to add?
The the stuff on Mural, the scribes and everything is different than how I have it. So just no, you'll find out which room you're in when you get popped in there. And we have people who didn't show up today that I put. The groups are going to be different sizes than I had imagined because a lot of folks didn't show up today. So And if you get bumped out or something, that's also why we're keeping the main room. If somebody gets bumped out, like you can come back in and I can like reassign you, I think.
So to be clear, when people click on the breakout room that they've been assigned to or they requested, it will be named for the question that they're supposed to ask? Or
it will not be, because you can't put that much information in there. I put the room and the room and the topic in the chat. Everyone should be able to see that.
Ah, I don't have chat open. Very good. Do any members have any questions?
Yeah, hey, it's Nick Leonard. What room am I supposed to go to? I'm sorry, I must have missed something.
I have you in room 1, which is
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
okay. Yeah, where could a psychedelic medicine program live in? I can't read this because it's too small. Sorry.
So everybody else is going to be sent to their room. You've got the list in chat here, so you know the topic. So if you want to grab that from the chat right now, you're in good shape. Or grab it before you click on join the meeting. Any other clarifying questions on the logistics? Room host, I'll have you change your yellow circle sticky with the appropriate name once you get there. All right, Jess, go ahead. And let's see. Does it look just like everybody that's supposed to move to a room has been moved to the room?
Stacy or Jess, can you guys drop me in one of the rooms?
That's Guthrie?
Yeah.
Yep.
I also need a room, please.
Well, we've got some, Jessica, Jess, you're on mute. And I'm assuming you're saying some of you are staying here because this is one of the rooms as well.
This is one of the discussion groups.
Yeah.
So if you're here, this is where you're supposed to be.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
If you are still here, look in
Very
the
exciting.
chat. The question for the main room is, how could interested task force members and their communities continue working together to advocate for this work? So that is the question box all the way over on the right side of the mural. So that's where our white space is, where if you're here with us right now, this is where we can add our thinking and start our conversation. And I'm not going to lead the conversation. Y'all know this information way more than I do. So as you want to talk verbally, great. If you'll highlight some things as you're working in this box, and then I'll ask for somebody towards the end of the time that would be willing to come on mic when we're all back together to share some kind of the highlights from this group. You all know the drill, okay?
Is this locked, Stacy? I can't change the names on the. Oh, because I'm in presentation mode. Never mind.
Yep, it should not be, but I will. So
no, I got it.
You got it? Okay. And I'm just starting the timer. Okay.
So I'm happy to start.
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
I had been planning to get to know my state rep and my state senator where I live in rural Scott County. And I am prepared to testify at the legislature if necessary, and just go public with my own story about how ketamine-assisted psychotherapy changed my entire life. And I'm happy to tell that on the record to anybody who's willing to listen. I'm hoping that we can unlock additional tools, especially psilocybin, but eventually MDMA and LSD, unlock additional tools to help other people. So that's what inspired me to apply for this task force, and I'm happy to run with it. And if that means doing like behind the scenes political work, speaking with state reps, state senators, testifying at the legislature, I'm on board.
Mhm.
I like that perspective.
So
Yeah,
you're
go ahead.
talking about perspective of individual work, Guthrie?
His phone is a thing. No, I like what Adam's saying about yes, the individual work, but sort of through kind of local political engagement, right? And no one's asked me to be to volunteer to speak at the legislature as they're discussing next year, but I'd be happy to do that as well. From a tribal perspective, I also agree. I think the journey of the medicine is something sort of unparalleled in this stage of life, I guess. In adulthood, I'm not trying to ramble on, but I agree with what he's saying. The level of engagement that you have with this medicine is important. From my perspective, it is all at a state level at this point. I kind of hope that our recommendations are carefully thought of next year as they go into the legislative session. One of the things I sort of am concerned about or wonder about really is sort of local level engagement, right? Like the cannabis was rolled out so conservatively that I do think that in the next 12 months, we're going to have to continue to educate locally within our municipalities and wonder what that looks like. So I kind of looking farther down the road and wondering what it might look like to engage at a city level, being down in Rochester. But no, this is a really interesting topic. I'm really kind of scratching my head on what future engagement would look like beyond sort of calling your state legislator and writing letters to those guys.
Just a quick logistical note, Jess, perhaps since anybody that's viewing this is just seeing this discussion, if you could focus in your screen on just this question, it might be more meaningful for those that are tuning in. So all the way over to the right. Yep. All right, didn't mean to interrupt the conversation here. Kit, though you had put something on here, do you want to add your thoughts to this conversation?
Yeah, I was thinking there's a few different groups that are already engaged in Minnesota, like public education and engagement that we could join. I know the Psychedelic Society of Minnesota is something that Jessica helps to run, and they've been basically hosting the viewing groups of the Psychedelic Task Force meetings. But if anyone wants to come up with more public engagement, like listening sessions, or I don't know, I've never been in this sort of world before of like public engagement, but I think shifting membership for a bunch of group members all into one other organization would be a good place to start. There are a few other organizations like Big Psych Minneapolis, the Medicine Objective, that all work in the same kind of realm of public engagement and education, and kind of promoting safe psychedelic use. So I think that could be an option too. I don't know.
Yep.
I know, Kit, I mentioned this. I can't remember if it was at a work group meeting or in the last task force meeting. My previous task force that I worked with had almost an entire, they created an advocacy group to testify at the legislature and to lobby for the elements, but it was a separate entity that they created. Obviously, had broader membership than just task force members, but that was the way they kind of went about it.
Now,
being able to lobby and whatnot.
Did they need to allocate any resources in order to do that, or was that strictly volunteer kind of working?
I think it was volunteer. I don't know. I kind of kept away from the from knowing too much about it since I was running the task force.
Yeah.
But it was very much like a grassroots movement that came out of the task force.
Okay.
Stefan, are you ready to weigh in with your thinking yet? Or are you still pondering?
I'm typing out on a sticky note.
Are you really? Oh.
Yeah. But, I mean, I can clarify what I'm saying on the sticky note. I think the lack of funding for the overall task force provides some insights as to like what the importance level of this medicine is to the state or the political parties within the state. This is almost, from my perspective, a check the box at that level, unfortunately. I think the approach, as they were mentioning before, is continued interaction at the local level, sharing stories as to how these medicines have helped people, and the benefits that lie behind them is crucial in order to really get some traction and move things forward.
I think if yours is that orangish colored box, Stefan, if you could either let it go, like click away from it, or drag it out to make it bigger, that would be very helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
And holler if you need help. This would also be a good point, since we're about halfway through the conversation time. Is there, I need one of you to step up and be willing to report out to the rest of the group the nature of our conversation. Is there somebody already that would be willing to do that? I'd kind of like to give you a heads up first.
I'll always nominate the attorney every time.
Oh, otherwise I can volunteer too.
I nominate Kit.
It's all you. Just so you're thinking with that different headspace, in that different headspace. But let's keep the conversation going. Getting back to that question at hand, how could interested task force members and their communities continue to work together to advocate this work? I mean, you got this group of people that have been together for a year. How can you harness that?
Question.
On.
Go ahead, Adam. I think it was Adam next. I'm not sure.
Kid had a question.
Would we lose support from MAD for like administrative things if we, at the end of this task force, no matter what we do?
Yep, totally.
Yeah, we're done.
Yep, our contract ends, so it would be self-motivated.
How would we continue to get support from MAD? Would we need to like allocate some sort of funds or get a new task force?
Yeah, they're in a rub, because where you would find those resources would be a bit of a challenge. So it would, my understanding is it would be a very volunteer, grassroots endeavor, those that are interested. Is that everybody else's understanding?
Yeah, I'm assuming that we're not going to have logistical support from the state after the end of the year.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. I wasn't sure if there was a way that we could like make a new contract or like hire an individual to help us out still.
Yep, no, very much volunteer driven.
Okay.
So one of the avenues of continued engagement that I sort of wonder about is aligning more closely with sort of the harm reduction movement and some of the stuff that Ari's up to. I think psychedelic in a mental health space is is a phenomenal growth opportunity, but really, as the public health crisis continues with fentanyl and meth, this is a significant opportunity for non-lethal drugs to come in and take that space, right? And so I feel like, in all of the things, harm reduction is maybe one of the places that's already established that we could live in.
It's interesting.
I like that idea. I was thinking probably the Psychedelic Society of Minnesota would be the lead organization. Now, Jessica quit her teaching job and is focusing full time. And recently, I think she recently turned into a 501c3 organization. That might be the main organization going forward. I'm personally not like involved in it. I currently have gone to one or two of their just open forums. But then I agree with Guthrie too. Ari is doing a lot of really interesting things. So I would look at Jessica and Ari and their organizations as two of the main leaders, the main organizations going forward. I don't know if there are others that I'm not thinking of. There's a lot of practitioners, so maybe Paula or Courtney, other people like that. But we're going to have to just stay together voluntarily and see what we can do politically at the Capitol next year and in following years.
What is Ari's organization?
I don't know if she actually has an official organization. She's a consultant in the area of harm reduction when looking at controlled substance generally. She recently wrote that really long, very well thought out white paper that she shared with all of us. She's passionate about this stuff. She does have an organization. Okay. No, she did actually start an organization recently. I can't think of the name of it, but she invited me to join on like LinkedIn or Facebook or something like that. So she does have an organization that she's leading. I don't recall the name of it.
What's her last name? I might be able to find it.
McHenry. Yeah.
So I'll interrupt here to say there's about a minute and a half left. I'd encourage all of you to just hop on this area of the mural and capture anything in here in a box. Just get it in here with words on the mural. So we've got a bit of a history of the conversation on the space. And then Kit, that also gives you a chance to just formulate your thoughts as we pivot back in about a minute. Okay, so let's just have some quiet time for you to get everything you can from this conversation into the mural space.
I did add a sticky for Guthrie's point about aligning with the harm reduction movement because I know you're on your phone, Guthrie. So if there's anything else you want me to add, let me know.
Thank you. I'm also open to meeting up anybody for a public celebration.
So
Happy hour.
Yeah, I think we should celebrate.
That would be fun.
I think we should get together. I think Ari's organization is called Impact Minnesota, or it's Impact MN, and the website is impactmn.org.
Thank you.
So that Curtis Hanna is following along, and he just sent me that on LinkedIn.
And Jessica, when you're ready, you could probably start the closed meeting. The alarm timer is going to go off in 4 seconds.
Yep.
There we go. And thanks, small group members. Good discussion.
They have 40 seconds left.
Yeah, I figured. And welcome back. Welcome back. What we're going to do with the remainder of our time then is just a simple debrief so we can hear kind of the highlights of the conversations in each one of these subject areas. Reminder, what we talk about in these groups doesn't have a direct impact on the report. It's just a chance to step back and do a little bit more broad thinking. So we're trusting that what we share out here in our informal report outs will help people that are listening and the rest of us that were in individual groups get a sense of what was discussed. So I'm going to go in order from left to right. The first discussion topic was, what are the elements of a formal education program and who, like what entity would be best responsible for it in the near future? Carolyn, you were staffing that group. Did you have a spokesperson or did that task fall to you?
I don't think we had a spokesperson. I'll give out some main points, and then if my teammates want to follow up with that, that would be
Perfect.
fantastic.
Very good.
So for kind of go backwards, who might be best responsible for this formal public education? The consensus was that MDUS, in terms of they're able to get out public health messaging, injury prevention, violence prevention, kind of information on substance use. So kind of housing a formal education plan somewhere in MDH to not have to rely on volunteers who are already very pressed for time was the suggestion. And then we didn't get into specific elements, but we did kind of condense the list that is in the report already into condensing it into main buckets of who would need kind of a formal education. So really focusing on first responders, the general public, healthcare providers of all stripes, and then the government or state entities as well are kind of the big chunks. And so if I missed anything, please feel free to jump in.
Any discussion members have anything to add from that first topic on the left side of the mural?
No, that was about it. Thanks.
Got it?
Karen. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, let's move to the next one over to the right. The question was, where could a psychedelic medicine program live successfully within the structure of state government? And I see some very small sticky notes there. So just as you're sharing your screen, if you could, I see some people making them bigger, thank you. But if you could zoom in tight, that might be helpful as well. And Carrie, you were staffing that group. Were you going to share out, or was there somebody assigned to that?
Yeah, we did not talk about assigning a spokesperson, okay. So others jump in. But so yeah, I think a lot of our conversation was it depends on what the legislature does with this information. And so and I think a big picture question was that the group didn't feel like we necessarily decided kind of what we hope to achieve with this. So if it's a medical model or an adult use model, it would depend on where that could be. So for example, if it was a more of a medical model, it might be at MDH or DHS. If it's more of a regulated adult use market, either adding it to the Office of Cannabis Management or creating a new similar agency. And just some other things that I thought were just to keep in mind that, we can learn a lot from what happened with adult use cannabis and kind of thinking in phases maybe and making sure that there's time to implement policies and adequate funding for any state agency that takes this on. Yeah, we talked about a lot of different things. Does anybody else want to jump in? And we talked about having a community-led advisory group that could kind of support the state agency and help think about policies. Really, it just talked about it's a really complex issue and it's going to take a bit of work. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. Very good. Thank you, Carrie, and that small group membership. Moving over to the next one, to the right. This question was, how could the cost of psychedelic medicine be affordable for people who need it? Nick, you were staffing that group. Were you the reporter outer person or somebody else stepping into that?
We did not talk about that, but I'm happy to report out, and feel free to jump in, other folks who were in the group. We talked about the cost of how much everything costs in the other states and ways in which we can or things that we want to think about, like reducing licensing fees and things like that. We also talked about medical assistance in tribes and how they may or may not also be able to get coverage since these drugs are Schedule 1. We didn't really have really many solutions. We talked a lot about sort of the questions that came up and whether or not other state programs and insurance could cover some of these clinical programs. Jess or Donovan or Helen, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think you did a fine job. I think we did just bring in some of the religious connotation, but I think the comments that you made pretty much cover that. So.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we were talking about, I was using the example of Colorado when they initiated their cannabis program, their adult regulated cannabis program, and they had so much extra revenue in the state that they invested it back into the community. And so that seemed to be a good way to get money. Whereas like the system with psilocybin services in Oregon is basically having to have the taxpayers bail out the program because it's way too expensive at this point. And then there was a webinar around some individual companies within Oregon and Colorado that are trying to prop up health insurance plans that will cover this, given that it's federally illegal, and whether that is something that exists or can be created in the state to help people pay for access.
All right, thank you, group 3. Final group on the far right side of the mural. Question: how could interested task force members and their communities continue working together to advocate for this work? Kit's going to report out on the conversation that happened here. Kit?
So we talked about 2 different individual pathways we could do. Is that either as a group, we could work with different organizations like the Minnesota Psychedelic Society of Minnesota, or with Impact MN, and kind of shift our membership over to one of those groups in a volunteer capacity, and come up with ways to like host education events, maybe talk to schools or colleges, come up with like more individual like listening sessions with the public, and just sort of public engagement activities in general. Another more fun thing that we could do for networking and for coming up with more ideas is kind of have a happy hour when the task force is done, where we can all kind of meet and speak in person, and keep it kind of casual, but come up with some more ideas about things we could do for our next steps. And then as individuals, another thing we can do is write letters to each of our own representatives. I know a lot of us come from different areas in Minnesota. Not all of us are directly in the Twin Cities. We could talk to our representatives as well. And then whoever wishes to, I know Adam mentioned it and a couple others, that they would be willing to testify to the legislative about their own experiences with psychedelic medicine and how it's helped them. I think that would be a great option as well.
Thanks, Kit. Before I turn it back over to Jessica to close the meeting, I'm wanting you to just zoom back out and have an opportunity, if you wish, to comment or add some thoughts to maybe a topic that you weren't talking about. So just a chance to share a little bit more if there was something that you wanted to add. All right. Jessica, I'll turn it back over to you to have any closing comments that you feel are necessary, some reminders, and then wrap this meeting. Oh, Paula, go ahead, Paula.
Sorry, 11th hour here. I just wanted to do a huge shout out to Jessica and to Caroline for all of, I mean, everybody for sure, all your contributions, and we've been working really hard, but the bulk of this report, which is an exceptional report. I mean, it is exceptional. It is so thorough and so well done. I mean, it's to me, it's just amazing what was created. So a huge shout out to Jessica and Caroline, who did the vast majority of the writing. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Paula. I appreciate that. If there's nothing else, we can end early, which is awesome. So know that anyone, if you want to provide additional feedback, you can leave it on Mural over the week. I encourage everyone to please go in and just look at the report and, provide any comments or thoughts that you have either in the report as a comment in the margins, or you can email myself or Caroline about some of those things, really trying to get everything done before Friday of this week. I don't know if we're going to do any working group meetings this month. I know we have them on the calendar, but I don't see them listed here. So I don't know if there is a plan to do that. I don't know that there's much more that we need to discuss at the working group.
And one of them falls on Thanksgiving anyway. So I would propose we suspend the groups for this month. I think that's a good idea.
So that works for me. I feel like we're pretty much done with our work, and I'm just really proud of the kind of collective expertise and wisdom and knowledge that everyone brought to the table here to get this heavy lift over the finish line. I'm really happy that we have our report done and that it's just kind of getting cleaned up. And we will have one final meeting next month for our December task force meeting, but it's really just going to be kind of winding things down and celebrating. I know I want to give special thanks to each of you individually. So I just want to invite folks to come to the December meeting so we can, acknowledge all the work we did and congratulate each other and kind of have it be a time for celebration and kind of closing down and thinking towards next steps. And yeah, Paula, do you have another question?
Yeah, sorry, just one more thing. Jess Burke, thank you too for keeping us herded and coordinating all of it. So just again, Jessica, Jess, and Caroline, I mean, really, really, really just hands-on. Thank you.
Yeah, and Stacy as well, phenomenal facilitator. It was a rough start for me, having to try to be a co-facilitator. I really appreciate all your mentorship, and you're a phenomenal facilitator. And I'll have more to say on that in December. I do want to give a shout out to each member individually. So with that, I think we'll close out. If you have any questions between the meetings, you can email Jess Burke. And if not, we'll see everyone back here on Zoom on December 2nd for our final closeout meeting, really just to say our goodbyes and thank each other for our work. All right, so thank you all so much for your attendance. Hope you have a good week, regardless of how it goes. It's going to be an interesting week. And we'll touch base next month.
All right, thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.